Public Access FC.
Hi, this is Daniel Díaz, host of Public Access FC, a new show about football culture and everything that we love about the game. Today, I'm joined by Ian Blackley and Tyler Hinman from San Francisco City FC. Together, we'll be talking about football in San Francisco and the power of community-led sports. Stay tuned. All right, so yeah, we're here for like a very special episode that we are calling Public Access FC. We're here with the team from San Francisco City Football Club, Ian Blackley, creative director, and Tyler Hinman looks after operations. Got short bios from you both that I'm just gonna read out so the viewers can get to know you a bit better. So Ian is a third generation San Franciscan. Didn't go to school in the city. He was very quick to point out. Background in marketing and advertising. Has worked in-house at Levi's for a few years in an ad agency, and brings that experience into the work that he does with the club, especially with like merchandising and like branding. He's been a supporter of SF City FC since 2018 and involved with it since 2022. Tyler is originally from Connecticut, has lived in SF since 2008. He's a software engineer by trade. He's also a puzzle expert and a 7-time champion of the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, which I feel like needs its own episode entirely.
I will close. I'll come back
to get into that. He attended his first SF City match in 2015 and has become more involved every year since, joining the members' board of directors in 2020. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I'll just introduce myself, I guess, quickly as well, because people aren't used to seeing me on screen. So I'm Daniel Díaz. I'm a filmmaker, occasional writer. I've lived in SF since 2019. And yeah, a recent SF City fan, which I've adopted as my local team since moving here from London, where, yeah, I support Tottenham and I also support Junior back in Colombia, where my family is from. So yeah, thank you again for joining us. Really excited to have you on board. And yeah, I think, I've got a quote here from revered Uruguayan writer, Eduardo Galeano. I don't know if either of you have ever read Football in the Sun and Shadow. Highly recommend it. It's kind of his, reflections, ponderings on like football from a kind of almost like socio-political like standpoint, but it's like a real kind of just like fan emoting just like over like the sport and everything that kind of like surrounds it, which is kind of what we want to kind of get into today. So I felt like it would kind of set the tone for for the conversation we're going to have. So Galeano says, the history of football is a sad voyage from beauty to duty. When the sport became an industry, the beauty that blossoms from the joy of play got torn out by its very roots. In this fin de siècle world, professional football condemns all that is useless, and useless means not profitable. So it feels fitting that we're here with the oldest community-owned soccer club in the US. And yeah, I just kind of want to get started with each of you kind of telling me a bit about your connections to football and your kind of personal stories like with the sport.
Yeah, for me, so I was like moved out of the city when I was a baby. I was raised in Reno. And like soccer wasn't normally or typically played out there. And like I would see it like, when we go into like Mexican restaurants, you'd see it on TV, and that was like my only kind of like relationship with it. And like the youth system was like so like messed up in the country where it wasn't easy to like kind of like play and get into for me. So I didn't really fall into it until like 2016, around the time when NBC got the Premier League television rights, and around the same time the NFL blackballed or blacklisted Colin Kaepernick
Mhm.
as like, okay, I'm done with NFL, American football. Let me look into like different sports. So that's how I kind of fell into soccer, football, and yeah, then from there, soon after is when I kind of discovered SF City, looking for something in my area, and yeah, try to help prop it up as much as I could.
Yeah, nice. And yeah, maybe we should do a quick terminology check. I'm gonna say football because you're a football
Yeah, that
fan,
was my
but
bad.
you're free, you're free to say soccer. Um,
We're FC. We're gonna stick with it.
there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, Tyler, go ahead. Your
Yeah,
question.
grew up in Connecticut, played a little bit of football and just semi-casual youth leagues growing up. I was not what anyone would call good or competent or skilled. But actually, in 1997, my dad's job took us over to England, where I did secondary school, basically high school, 8th through 12th grade essentially. And we got into the Premier League over there. My dad was looking to get into it and asked a colleague about it. My colleague, his colleague, followed Chelsea, so we started too. And I saw the grimace there. That's okay. Um, yeah, so it's just kind of getting into that and getting your arms around. Okay, there's this league with no playoffs, but then there's also you play a lot of those same teams in this other kind of playoff style tournament, and then there's European tournament. So just kind of getting into all that and continuing to follow them. Coming back to the States, and the coverage has only gotten more thorough from NBC Sports and all that. So it's easier and easier to follow them. It's not so easy to wake up for a 4 a.m. match sometimes, but yeah, just kind of getting more and more into it. And I think a colleague and my job was, I think he went to SF City's open tryouts way back when and said, I'm going to this U.S. Open Cup match over the weekend against Cal FC. It's gonna be right at Keys. I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I'll check it out. And I just got a ticket, sat on the south side, and I saw this group of people across the way who were singing and chanting like I used to seeing on European soccer broadcasts. Like, okay, that looks pretty fun. So this was several months later. There was the beginning of 2016. We were playing what turned out to be our last game in the NorCal Premier League, and I went down to Crocker Amazon on a really cold night, as it tends to be down there, and stood with the Northsiders, and kind of we won our last match in that league, and it was a lot of fun. And I've been going to matches ever since, and got involved with communications and joined the board, and it's only increased since then.
Awesome, nice. What part of England were you in when you did?
I lived in Sunningdale in Berkshire.
Oh,
And,
okay.
and my school was in Thorpe in Surrey. It's
Okay.
an international school there.
Okay. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, Chelsea makes sense, I guess. They train out those ways as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. Cobham. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which location of another international school where I almost attended, but
Yeah.
went to this other one.
Okay, I'll let that go then.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you spoke a little bit there about like the various tournaments. I feel like it's always funny here, like kind of like explaining like the FA Cup, the League
Right.
Cup. We're champions of Europe, but not that Europe. Like this kind of like understanding like the people here. So yeah, I want to kind of get in a little bit to how, like just football in the US and kind of your take on like football culture in the US. How does it differ from other places where there's maybe more of an ingrained, accessible, perhaps like football culture, like Europe, like Latin America, to maybe act as like a bit of like a precursor to then getting into SF and SFC.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. It's just at the base level, it's not as popular a sport here as elsewhere. Here we have the NFL and MLB and NBA and all that stuff. There's a lot of directions where a lot of great athletes can go, whereas in a lot of other places, it's the only game in town, or certainly the most popular game in town by far. And there's also the promotion relegation aspect of it. Like here, we don't have the romance of like a really small community team just getting up into the top leagues just by winning. Like that's not possible here. You need a lot of money. That's what does it. That's what talks. So I think we lose some of that romance here. Kind of that underdog story. There's like a ceiling on it here because of the money aspect.
And I also think like the youth system here, like abroad, you have academies that are mostly free for like the families to have their kid like play.
Yeah.
Then they train them, then eventually sell them, and that's how the club makes money off that talent. Here, depending on where you're at in the country, parents have to pay like $3, $4, $5,000 a year, so it's a high barrier of entry to get into as a sport, as opposed to other sports. Like you could easily do a pickup game of basketball with your friends and like develop your skills that way, but it's a lot harder to do that with football.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. I think that I think there's like a lot of difference around also just like the fan experience and like how fans live the game here. And for me, that's why, you know, SF City is like really kind of like caught my attention. I started doing my research, you know, before getting on the flight out here from London, and it really kind of stood out to me in terms of like what the club was about, and this notion of obviously being like community focused and like having this buy-in from fans that like this is our club regardless of like financial status, regardless of like league. And I feel like over here typically you'll get fans like supporting a team in like, you know, England or in Spain, or like really kind of going hard for them, and that's always been, you know, kind of confusing to me in terms of like understanding like, okay, like where does that come from, because so much of it is like from nostalgia and it's from identity, and you're kind of in this position where you're almost like reverse engineering that. So I'm just kind of interested to hear your take on like the fan experience as well, of like, you know, what is football, soccer for fans in the US versus like that fan experience in other leagues and other regions.
Yeah, I could speak on like us, like we like the way I see, having like supporter ownership model is win, lose, draw, you have like an impact on the team. Like, there's in, American sports, there's no relegation. So if your club sucks, it's okay, you could try next year. And, but there's outrage of fans and they demand, lay off this person or,
Right.
but, nothing really happens. But with here, we listen to our fans. No one's really told us to get rid of Birdie. We have no intentions to. But we allow them to have a voice in a lot of aspects of the club. Like, we kind of switched to have a traditional kit style. So this kind of template, if you want to call it that, was decided by our fans a couple years ago. So having the solid stripe for every year with like minor tweaks, very similar to like Ajax.
Yeah.
They have the red stripe. So that's like one thing. If we have a few options for kits, we've offered those to our fans to kind of vote on. We do a membership scarf that's designed by our fans and voted on. So we get a lot of different submissions. Then yeah, if there's something we're not doing and our fans have ideas, we're easily reachable. So people would send us emails and be like, hey, have you guys thought about doing this or whatnot? And we've gone and, kind of made those introductions to get stuff like that with like partnerships with like who we've partnered with for Pride. So every year we do like a special jersey and we play in it once a game in June for our Pride match. And those like nonprofits that we work with are mostly driven by like fan support or like an artist that we're working with. Like this year with Queer Life Space, that was suggested on by Jeremy Novi.
Yeah, great. Sorry, go ahead.
And moreover, the fan aspect of things is a really good safeguard against, you look at the situation with like the Athletics at the moment getting, torn out of Oakland, where they've had decades of great support, and playing in this minor league stadium in Sacramento, and it's a total mess, and it's pretty much on the whim of one greedy billionaire. Like that's not something that's ever going to happen to us, because we have that 51% supporter owned, and like we're not going to. There's no such thing as some rich guy coming in and buying up the team and saying, okay, I'm going to move them to San Jose. Like that's not going to happen. It belongs to the people. And, we have investors, and, money is important to a large extent, but there's not going to be any seismic changes like that. That's going to disappoint the fan base as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense, which I think kind of feels a lot more like a European, like Latin American kind of like model of a club, whereas I feel like it's so much more common here among the major American, like US sports, for, kind of transplanting city to city, state to state, which again was always like mind-boggling. I always remember the case of like MK Dons, like Wimbledon,
Yeah.
moving up to Milton Keynes, and it was so like confusing
Mhm.
as a child, being like, how, like, that's not allowed, like, come on now. And then obviously like the community owned club that was born out of it now reaching the same levels as MK Dons, and like how much of a beautiful story that was. And you know, also, I mean, it goes back as far as, you know, Arsenal moving from Southeast London to North London in the early 1900s, if we want to go there. So that it does happen. We don't like it.
I'm from Connecticut. 28 years later, I am still bitter about the Hartford Whalers leaving town. That's all I want to talk about.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit there, but you know, the football landscape in San Francisco, and obviously SF having such a like specific like identity and like rich like culture. Yeah, just kind of talking a bit about like how that's embodied like in the club. I think obviously the community work. I know a lot of the kind of like social impact stuff that you all do as well, and you know, working with local artists. A lot of the community like fan engagement piece, the supporter like ownership stuff, like is, I think, really kind of like taps into that. But is there, you know, anything else about kind of like the ethos and the spirit of the club that even at like board level, or when the club was like founded, if you can kind of even go that far back, that you know, decisions that are made to kind of like ensure that that is like embodied in SFC?
Yeah, I guess we could go back a little bit from the beginning. So the club started as a SFSFL, San Francisco Soccer Football League, SEO.
Yeah, figure that out.
Yeah, so submitted the letter of intent to play September 4th, 2001. First season was in 2002. SFSFL is the oldest running like semi-pro amateur soccer league in the country, going back to like
1902 or something like that. It's way back there.
It has 3 divisions and promotion relegation. So 2002, we started at the bottom, which is now called the first division.
Then it's like League One in the UK.
Then you get promoted to major division. Then there's Premier. So we started in the bottom division. In 2002, 2003, we won the championship in that division, got promoted to the second division. So 2004, won that championship, got promoted to the top division, and 2005 won that championship. So we went back to back before Wrexham.
They copied us.
But
no one thought of that before.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of where it started. Then in 2014, there was murmurs about pro soccer coming to San Francisco, and you had the World Cup. Then you had these like sports marketing guys and soccer football fans at USF, and they met with like American Outlaw chapter in San Francisco at like pubs in like Haight-Ashbury and whatnot. And they kind of concocted this idea to promote a club that already existed in the city and move it up to like the 4th division, which is like where the national leagues are, like NPSL, USL, League 2, then that new one, the League of the Clubs, or for the clubs. But yeah, so they looked at those other city at those clubs, and yeah, SF City kind of spoke to them. Then yeah, it was just in like living rooms where the idea and like the operating agreement and how to like actually make this living, breathing kind of club kind of started. And yeah, that was in 2014, then like officially 2015 is kind of when it took off. Then we like 2 months before we became like supporter owned, there's another club in Nashville Soccer Club or Nashville Football Club. There's one is defunct, the other is the MLS club.
Right.
But the defunct one had supporter ownership in a way, but they folded 2 years later. So that's how we are able to claim oldest, because
Still here.
the first one died, unfortunately.
Still here. Okay, and then, I mean, could we go into more detail just about exactly what supporter owned like means, like in practice? What does that look like? What inspired the model?
Yeah, so the club's operated by the members board, and all those members are supporters, so they pay their annual dues. But I think most of the ones on this year's board and in past are lifetime members. And every like fall we have a meeting with the broader membership, and people are able to like make their case why they should be on the board. Then everyone votes on it. Then those people bring up, their individual ideas on, what they want to do with the club. That's how we do like sponsorships and partnerships are through the board. Um, and yeah, so it's kind of just having like that control of the club as members, and you kind of represent the broader membership as like constituents.
Okay, awesome. That's great. And then, I mean, yeah, there's a couple like tracks I kind of want to take down from what you said, but you spoke about sponsorship, you spoke about partnerships. One of the like major kind of like initiatives and like partnerships is, you've got it on your shirts, like the Muni like sponsorship, which is just aesthetically like very pleasing. Obviously, it has like the double-sided kind of benefit of like promoting public transit. And I think especially at a time now where there's a portion of the city, I guess, like fervently like advocating for like cars and driving, and this is obviously like a hot button issue. Among among people in the US in a way that I'll never understand. But yeah, talk to us about how that came about.
Desperation. So coming out of the pandemic, so the pandemic canceled 2020 and 2021 for us. So we resumed play 2022. Most of our investors have kind of like lost interest in the club at that point. Most of our sponsors previously were their businesses. So we couldn't really look into them. We were cold emailing hundreds of businesses in San Francisco, from the biggest building in downtown to like smaller local shops. And it was like 2 years of that and not really getting any bites. And can we curse on here?
Yeah.
Okay. I was feeling like really shitty asking like, like small businesses during like the pandemic for like a couple $1,000, to help support this like football club. And coming out of 2023, we didn't have a sponsor that year, and we kind of owed our league and like parks money, and we're like, okay, like we need to think of something different, or we have to go on like hiatus. So I was like, putting my marketing advertiser hat on, and I was like, what if we went to a company or organization that had a really cool logo that we don't ask any money for, because we'd make the money we would have asked for in jersey sales.
Yeah.
And the only name on that list really was Muni. So built a pitch deck, shown that previous seasons we had like our membership cards look like the old fast passes. We had these like match day ticket vouchers that look like paper transfers. The supporters have been singing a song about taking Muni to Kezar Stadium. So put all that in this deck, send it to like 12 people at Muni. I was like, hey, you need more riders. We need more supporters. Let's just kind of like work together. No money. Let's just kind of like see how this works. And yeah, it caught fire. Like, we announced that October 2023, then got a lot more like followers and supporters. Muni was hit up by agencies across the country looking at the agreement so they could do the same thing with their local sports teams. So yeah, it's just been like a whole new life for the club. That partnership.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very, very cool. Yeah, the shirts are great. The design is awesome. And yeah, I mean, one of the things that we wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to chat about as well was, on May 9th, I'm going to say, Mayor of San Francisco, Daniel Díaz, announced a new professional soccer club coming to the city. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to understand, give you an opportunity to kind of like chat about that situation from the club's perspective, and learn a bit about the reaction of the community the fans and what SF City stands to lose, essentially, if that goes through.
Yeah. Well, it did go through. I think yesterday it was a unanimous vote.
I mean, that was it's nothing unexpected. Unfortunately, it's like I said earlier. About money talking. And what we've tried to build. It's just kind of a shortcut to that. That really kind of it kind of rubs us the wrong way, especially when we've arranged our schedule and fought hard to be at Kezar Stadium. It's like iconic stadium the 49ers used to play. It's been really great for us, and for another team to just throw a bunch of money around and say, okay, well, we're going to play at Kezar now, and like how we govern like what teams can play there. Like that's just forcing us out for really no good reason other than that they can. So it's just frustrating to kind of see that see that come in as I said, kind of a shortcut to the hard work we're doing in building this community and making a club that's really of the people. I think there's kind of a perception issue as well, kind of speaking to kind of people's knowledge of the soccer scene in the U.S. It's going to be an MLS Next Club, and I think people just look at that MLS acronym and just say, "Oh, MLS is coming to San Francisco." That's really not the case. Like Messi is not going to be coming to play at Kezar. So I think people are kind of latching onto that a little to an extent, and think we're kind of much smaller potatoes when we're really not. It's at a more or less commensurate level. We have some incredible talent on our squad and in the league as a whole.
El Farolito, they beat like 3 or 4 MLS Next Pro clubs in the Open Cup. So the level of talent is roughly the same. And it will be, but it's just,
I guess just to kind of like back it up for viewers that don't know the kind of like context that we're talking about. I can try and do my best to kind of like summarize it, but just to kind of like just lay out like what the situation is. This announcement was for a new professional club at this MLS Next level, calling themselves Golden City FC, I believe, coming in to San Francisco 2026 2027 season. That seems to be a bit unsure, maybe you know more than I do, and making Kezar Stadium their home in a way that would essentially take up space in the schedule typically occupied by SF City FC games. Is that more or less just like to lay out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of renovations going along with that, which is great, but we're not seeing a lot of possibility for coexisting in that space, because they're governing. They have right of first refusal there, and that's just in practice going to push us out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that there's still a busy schedule coming up. There's 6 home games left. I believe. So people can go to sfcityfc.com, check the schedule, find out how to support, turn up. The attendance has been great. A group of us went to the first home game of the season. I think we were like 1,500 people there. We had an awesome time. I'll be at probably most of like the remaining home games. Obviously follow you all on like Instagram. You're putting out some really good stuff. And thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, our pleasure.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
All right.